Okay, I learned something about the parable of the talents that for me was really fun, and I spent quite a bit of time thinking about it since um, over a week ago when I started putting the pieces together like this, so I thought I'd share it. Maybe I'm late to the party on this one, but if not, maybe this will help you guys see something different. So, the parable of talents, there's a master that gave his servants talents 5, 2, and 1. The 5 and 2 doubled, and the 1 hid his talent and then was punished for returning just the talent that he was given back to the master. And traditionally, at least in my experience, we see this as punishing the slothful servant who was paralyzed in fear, so afraid of the hard master that he couldn't do the work that was expected of him. He just hid and did nothing. And so we were reading this last week in Other Squirm, and I don't know, it just sounded different for some reason. The way that people were commenting and stuff, it didn't sound the same as the way I'd been reading it. And so what I've learned, the short of it, is that the servant understood exactly what he was supposed to do, and he chose not to participate. He says, I knew that you were a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid the talent in the ground. Here is what is yours. So he says he was afraid. He says he knew. And he says, knew him to be a hard man. As I was thinking about this, kind of putting all this together, I realized that the reaping where you did not sow, I don't know, for some reason it never stuck out to me. And then I realized that it comes across in my mind as this accusation. And I think it was because of an experience I had a couple weeks ago. And I'll get to that in a minute. But it's an accusation. He's saying, I know that you're someone who reaps where you don't sow. You're someone who collects money where you don't work. You are a man who invests and expects a return. And therefore, I felt fear. But the problem is that fear was the word that stuck out to me, and I wondered if there was a different translation for that. Turns out that everybody translated the word as fear, but if you look at the Greek, it's phobia, and phobia is not just fear in the Greek. It's also avoidance, among other variations of that type of interpretation. And like arachnophobia is not a fear of spiders. It could also be an avoidance of spiders. And phobia shows up in other places in Matthew. In some of those places, it can also mean avoidance. You can see it if you just replace the word fear with avoidance. The verse makes as much sense as it does with fear. So if I put that in there, it makes more sense with what the servant is saying. He's not saying I was afraid and therefore I hid. He's saying I wanted to avoid the responsibility and therefore I hid the talent in the ground so that when you returned, I could give you what was yours, but still not engage in this plan that you have set up. And the master condemns him for not it condemns him not for losing the money or not losing the money. Like evidently the master isn't concerned about the losing his investment as much as he is about his servant not investing in it at all. And which is interesting, right? Like if the servant went to try to double it with the investors and lost it all, I wonder what the reaction of the master would have been. But evidently he got a very severe punishment, the worst punishment that an investor can give you, not for losing the money, but for just sitting on it and doing nothing. And this parallels a lot of stuff in the real world that what I've been thinking about recently. And so I think that's maybe why it came up. And so if I take this to an extreme, and then I'll come back around, the master is the investor. The Lord is has this family business of salvation, and he expects to be able to invest in us the gospel in all of its different facets and functions. And that his investment of the gospel in us will have a return, that we will then use the joy that he has given us, the mercy and grace and all of the wonderful things that the gospel brings, and we will then multiply that goodness to other people. That's one way to interpret it, just kind of like to complete the parallel. And I was thinking about this because, so this is the long version. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a friend who's kind of an entrepreneur type, and he starts businesses, small businesses, and gets them up and running. And then that's just kind of what he does. Like, he doesn't manage the businesses a whole ton as much as he starts them and keeps them running, gets new ideas off the ground. And he was telling me about how he had this idea, and so he took some of his money and took a high-performing employee and said, "Hey, are you interested in this idea?" And the employee said, "Yeah, let's do it. I'm ambitious. Let's go." So they jumped in, started this new little business that they hadn't done before, and it's going pretty well. In business, this is kind of an ideal scenario where you have an employee that's ready to execute. You have an idea and resources to put towards that, and everybody benefits because the employee is now growing and developing, and the investor is getting a return on investment. Great. It doesn't always happen that way. Oftentimes, it turns out that employees don't want to work to benefit the employer. They want to work to benefit themselves. Like, if they work and they can earn $1, great, but they don't want to earn their employer $1. Some people are like this, where they feel kind of victim to having to work for their boss and earn them $1 when their boss, quote unquote, doesn't do anything. He just like sits around and does nothing. When in actuality, the boss, the investor, is the one who put forward the resource and risk and got everything coordinated to get everything happen. So there's this kind of like two ends of the spectrums where you have an employee who's the 5-talent employee, where you see his potential and you're just dumping money into him because he's going to keep returning the investment. And then you have the 1-talent employee, where you only give them a little bit because they're not likely to really do anything with it. They're just there passing time. They're just surviving. They're just doing the bare minimum, hoping not to get in trouble. Like, "Master, I didn't want to do too much while you were gone. I wanted to go do other things, go skiing with my buddies. So I sat on my talent. I buried it in the dirt. And then now that you're here, I'll just give it back to you. And therefore, you haven't lost anything. We're good to go. And we'll do the same thing next week." And so it makes sense that the master would be pretty upset about this. And he calls him slothful, but he also calls him wicked, which to me, whenever I hear something like that, like in the parable of the mediator and stuff like that, it makes me think that there's something else going on in the story. Like, if the servant wasn't interested in participating in the responsibility, why wouldn't he just decline? Why wouldn't he just say, "Oh, no, thanks. I'm good this week. I don't need to do this"? Like, there's something else going on where the servant knows the responsibility, knows that he's a hard man, knows the expectation, and still decides to take on the responsibility and do nothing with it, knowing that he's falling short of the expectation. Like, he is consuming the resource of the investor, knowing that the investor is not going to get any profit off of it. And that's pretty much grounds for calling him wicked, because he's like, "I could have given that talent to one of the other guys and they could have done more with it. Why am I even bothering with you? Like, you knew what I was going to come back and expect. You could have went and invested with the bankers, and I could have received what was mine with interest." And in the end, that's what he does. He gives the talent to the other guys. And so I also come from a family where there's like small business, and this is a real thing, where employees are eager to learn and absorb to a certain point. You see this especially in construction, where as soon as they get to the top of the learning curve, they're like, "Okay, well, I've topped out, my pay's capped, and I'm not learning as much as I was. I might as well go start my own business and do this thing my way, which then means that they're going to be competing with the person who trained them and taught them everything they know. And that's just a part of the business. That's just a part of life. But the thing that this master is saying that's different is this master is saying, if you stay with me, if you do not leave, there is no cap, there is no ceiling. You will continue to increase forever with me, essentially becoming a partner in the family business of salvation. And if you stop short and decide that you're good, you've got enough of the business education and you want to leave and go do your own thing, that's fine, that's your decision, but everything will be taken away from you. And so it is so interesting that is the relationship. It's not a slothful servant. It's not a lazy servant who's getting his hand slapped because he took a nap that day. It's a servant who is sabotaging the business ventures of this investor and is going to be punished for it because he misrepresented the trust that he was willing to take on. In the same way, the Lord expects more of us. The Lord expects us to take on this work of salvation and to take it seriously and to be able to invest in our brothers and sisters. Like, that is the work and glory of God, to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of our brothers and sisters. And we're engaged in his work, in his family business. And so it's not laziness. It's not like, hey, get up earlier and try harder. It's more like, if you're not taking this seriously to double your efforts, you are squandering sabotaging the efforts that the Lord has in this work. And so I think there's a lot of really cool examples of how to magnify and how to better invest these talents in the work of the gospel. But it was just so enlightening to me that the master, maybe everybody's already on this page, I don't know, but it's so enlightening to me that the master's not talking about slothfulness. He's talking about being able to give us a talent and us not have the bitterness and victim mentality of, oh, I have to work for this employer. Oh, I have to obey the commandments. Oh, if I don't do this, I'm going to be punished. And I just want to avoid the responsibility of this thing called the gospel. And so I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I know if I don't go to church, I'm going to get in trouble. So I'll go to church. And I'll be nice. So I'll shake everybody's hand and I'll read the scriptures and I'll do everything I'm supposed to do. That way, at least I can keep my job. I won't get fired. I'll be in the family business. I won't get cast out. I'll be okay. Everything will be all right. And the Lord's saying, no, that's not going to work. Like, the family business is not maintaining. It's not staying in the black. It's not avoiding losses. The family business is investing and taking risks and going out of your way to reach out to our brothers and sisters and fellowship and love. And so, yeah, I just thought that was really cool. And it's kept me up at night a couple of times, just thinking about how cool this parable is in the light of true entrepreneurship, and how upset an entrepreneur investor would be if you gave a bunch of money to a guy and then later, when it comes due, a year later, 10 years later, a week, whatever, he says, oh, here you go. And he just gives you back the money that you gave him. The investors I know would be furious. There'd be lawsuits like crazy, because typically what happens is you invest money and there's like basically a promissory note of like, you're going to get 10% back, and 10% in 2 years or something like that. And if you're counting on that, like that, if you don't get it, that money that you gave them could have been put somewhere else. And so you're not like, oh, you're such a lazy person that I invested with, you're like, okay, did you try? And the person who took your money is like, no, I didn't try because I wanted to avoid the responsibility that you gave me, so I just buried it in the ground. That way I wouldn't get in trouble. And you'd be like, what? You intentionally just buried my money knowing that I was going to come back? It's just a totally different vibe. So that's it. Just thought that I would share that with you guys because it's been fun for me. Later.